As promised, here is the first view of the Call of Jonas Creed in paperback form. It is just a thin little book, not as big as my normal novels, and it's selling for I think $8.99 on Amazon. Now the reason for it being so small is it is a bit of a prequel to a new series I'm working on, and I wanted to be a bit of a teaser to show you what the world is going to be like, what's going to happen, who the characters are going to be. Obviously there isn't a lot of backstory in this. It is just to get the feel for what's going to happen in it, and it will act as a bit of a prequel, like I said. And I thought I'd read some of it for you guys. Bereaved, Jonas Creed stared over the mound of dirt before him. A wreath of white and yellow flowers hung over a rough-edged marble headstone that glared back at him, accosting him with his failures as a father and husband. There was no one else, just him and the awful silence screaming in his ears. In terrible anguish, he pulled at the heavy black and grey beard that covered his blotched face. A gift from many years of felling trees in harsh weather. Tears streamed down his cheeks, wetting his beard as he forced a smile and remembered a time before his son became a man. A time when Joran was but a boy playing with sticks instead of swords. A time when his wife was still alive, not lying before him under a heap of dirt in the deathly chills of the vacant cemetery. There had been many wonderful days in his life since the birth of his son, but none were better than that very day 16 years ago. With all the stress that day had brought, it had been burned into his memory forever. The day had started off just like any other during the previous few months, with him waking in a pool of sweat, breathing heavily and glancing around the dark room, searching, listening, and gripping the sheets tight. But then he heard the groans of his wife next to him and saw her turn in her sleep, a gigantic belly lifting and pulling at the sheets. His heart slowed, and he wiped the sweat from his face, knowing he'd had just another nightmare. Jonas threw the sheets aside and swung his legs off the bed, yawning, stretching, and forcing his eyes wide to wake himself and get ready for the day. He quickly dressed and then tiptoed across the room to Ayla's side of the bed. He lifted the blanket, smiling as he rubbed the big mound where her flat stomach used to be, and kissed it. "Where are you off to so early in the morning, mister?" he heard her ask with a groggy voice, gentle and soft. "No kisses for me today?" she mocked. The sun was barely up, its orange rays creeping through the wooden slats over the windows, the thin beams of light giving life to the gloom as a cool breeze accompanied it. "Aye, only because if I start, I won't stop," Jonas said, all serious, brows knitted with deep creases between his eyes as he felt a warm hand slip into his. "Don't you dare leave me begging for a kiss. You will have to contain yourself," she chuckled. "Don't work too late today. The little one has been kicking me all night long. I fear the time is drawing close." She didn't know just how right she was. He leaned over Ayla and kissed her, squeezing her warm arms with his cold hands, and felt goosebumps come alive over her body. "You're cold," she snapped, and yanked the blankets over her arms. "Hey, you wanted a kiss. I merely live to please you." He laughed at her scowl and slipped from the room, hearing her call to him as he closed the door. "Get the midwives to come and see me this afternoon, just to be safe." "Yes, dear." "And bring some bread with you." "All right, dear." "Oh, and some cold meats." He rolled his eyes, sighing in the dark, and picked up the fella's axe that leaned on the wall. "Of course, Ayla." "What happened to dear?" He heard her growl and chuckle as he quickly sneaked from their home, knowing he would pay for his insubordination later. "Jonas!" Her voice followed him down the narrow footpath of his garden, but it was already growing faint by the time he reached the gate, where he smiled at the crooked metal arms of some structure his wife had been toiling with. "You doubt me, but it will be beautiful. You just wait and see," she had told him a few days back when she had started the project. Dew darkened the red sandy roads, a layer of wet covering the surface of everything left out in the open. He made his way down the street. "Ah!" Jonas cried and nearly fell because of the slippery mud, arms swinging wildly for balance as his boots gathered clumps of clay. He stopped at a dry patch of grass under the awning of Calvar's bakery and stamped his feet to rid them of the muddy parasites. All around him, doors creaked open and closed with a caring touch so as not to wake the entire village. Men and women groaned and yawned, readying for the day. Jonas hoisted his axe over his shoulder and walked past the building of grey stones packed with red clay, which sealed it from the cool draughts that came ever so frequently during the winter seasons. Angelica and Toli, the village's midwife, shared a home out of convenience, for neither had children nor a husband to concern themselves with. He would need to come back later to get them, but for now he needed to head west. The walk up to the forest in the mountains didn't feel particularly bothersome today. Jonas felt light, his spirits high and his mood jaunty. With a big smile on his face, he joined the other fellas already chopping down trees, stripping them of their branches by running their axes along the trunks, cleaving through the wood like butter. "What you smiling at, you big lug? Get to work. Your plums have done their job. Now you do yours," called a man with a great ragged head of brown hair and a short, crooked nose that leaned to the right. Jonas couldn't help but laugh even more. "Oh, Jurgensen, life's too short to be angry all the time. Today, you won't get me to join you. And I have to leave early to get the midwives. And if you don't start working pretty soon, this day will never end. Just wonderful. I got the happy one today, I swear. There's always got to be one every day. Bryson needs a partner to trim the skinnies at the back. Lend him a hand for the day. At least there you won't be missed when you run off again. This baby of yours is already making the rest of us work twice as hard. Can you imagine how I feel then?" Jonas chuckled and saw the grin on Jurgensen's broad face. "Good. Maybe we can make a fellow out of him yet." Jonas slapped him on the shoulder and said, "We don't even know if it's a boy or a girl yet." "Does it matter? I'll not have my daughter lugging logs around with the likes of you bunch hot on her heels. I'm her godfather. She won't be safer anywhere else." Jurgensen laughed as Jonas strode past him and climbed over the fallen tree. "I just hope she looks like Ayla. Still don't know if it's a boy or a girl. Uncle Jonas!" came a high-pitched wail from the woods over the rise. "Uncle Jonas!" He turned around, searching the woods for movement, and called back, "Over here!" Through the darkness of the forest, he saw a figure running towards him, its short, thin legs buckling from exhaustion. Then a boy darted into the clearing, stumbling forward and breathing heavily. "Here, boy!" "What is it?" Men turned from their work and gathered as the boy drew close, huffing and wheezing air with terrible rasps from his throat. "It's time! Ayla!" The boy sucked in some air. "The baby's coming!" Eyes wide, Jonas tensed up, his heart racing crazily. "Did you call the midwives, boy?" he shouted. "Are they on their way?" bent over with his thin, frail arms resting on his knees. The boy glanced up and wiped the snot dripping from his nose with his rolled-up sleeve. They left when it was still dark out for a berth in Euronia. We have no one. Shit. His axe dropped to the ground as he sprinted from the clearing with some of his fellow friends following close behind. Ayla! Jonas burst through the door, heart pounding in his chest, and heard a humming chant echo from down the hall, followed by a shriek. I'm here! The world spun, eyes darting, legs moving on their own. He could not remember giving them orders to run. The weathered grey boards of the corridor walls rushed at him, and his hands shot up instinctively in front of him. The impact to the slats was too much for the wall, splitting the timbers with his weight as one arm went straight through, burying up to the shoulder. He yanked it out, tearing the skin from his arm, and spun around, running for the room to his right. Stopping in the doorway, he watched a long-robed man of greying years who was holding Ayla's hand, mumbling a prayer over and over. No offense, Arlon, but I don't want whoever you are praying to here in this house. Ayla screamed again, and he rushed forward, grabbing her other hand. She lay in a tub with her legs propped over the sides, the rusty worn edges cutting into her calf under her knee, a thin trickle of red leaking to the floor. Her white gown was soaked from the water as she thrashed about, sticking to her naked body, her hair plastered to her face in a sheen of sweat. It all looked very undignified, but there was nothing for it. She had to push through this, and more so. The lukewarm water sloshed over the sides of the tub, splashing over Jonas and making the wooden floor slippery. He glanced back to the priest, who had fallen silent. Thank you for lighting the fire under the water heater. Harlon inclined his head and whispered, I thought it could bring us some comfort. What do we do now? He begged, and leaned closer to his wife. I'm no midwife, Jonas, Harlon mumbled, spreading his hands. I only bless and pray for good health. Another scream tore through the home, and Ayla's hand shot up, grabbing Jonas' ear to pull it down against her wet breast. I don't care who you are or what you can or cannot do, but get this baby out of me. She let go, and Jonas dropped to the floor, rubbing his burning ear, surprised at her strength. Okay, hold on. Bring me some sheets and thread, he said, and rolled up his sleeve, kneeling over the end of the bath to get close. You will have to push, dear. I know it hurts, but there is no other way. You know nothing, bastard! Her head careened backward, and she let out another scream, veins bulging on her forehead and neck as her face turned red. Jonas couldn't think of a time he had ever heard her swear, and tried to calm her, rubbing her leg as he nervously muttered, It's going to be okay, dear. Oh, shut up! You did this to me! Jonas cleared his throat and slipped back away from her wrath. Push! He shouted, glancing at the priest who had run into the room with a basket full of brown and white sheets. Ayla grabbed Jonas' hand and squeezed, trembling from pain and cold, sobbing utterly as she screamed and pushed. I feel something. Breathe, Ayla. Now push! Jonas felt the thin hairs, then the side of the head. Push! The bath water turned red, and he wanted to scream to the priest for help, but saw the man's wide eyes and feared for the worst. She was in it now. There was no turning back. Breathe, Ayla! Push! She shouted again, gritting her teeth. He felt a tiny ear and nearly wept. Push! a shoulder, push, an arm, chest, push, a soft bum, and Ayla screamed, clutching the sides of the bath, bending the metal with adrenaline rushing through her. Nearly there, push, a leg, then feet, and he raised it from the water quickly and grabbed the umbilical cord between his teeth, tearing it in two. Tie it off, priest, he said, spitting blood onto the floor. It's not breathing. Give it here, roared Arlon, and held out his hands, taking the baby as the mother wailed and the father stood with eyes wide, lips parted to release a scream of utter helplessness. He turned the baby over, tapping it on the back a few times, the silence in the air and overwhelming horror. Only the whimpering of the stressed parents filled the room. Jonas stood with his hands in his hair, staring at it as snot and tears streamed down his face. He was slowly backing away to the door, feeling the urge to run and never stop, to never turn back. A soft wail was born at first, growing louder and louder. Then tiny arms and legs were suddenly kicking the air. The child breathed, and Jonas sagged to the floor, a sensation he had never felt before sweeping over him, a feeling of desperate relief. He wailed and crawled over the wet floor to his wife in the tub, grasping her hand and kissing it dearly while she also cried with joy. Arlon wrapped the baby in a sheet and handed it to Ayla. Congratulations, it's a boy. Jonas leaned over her, staring at the tiny, frail boy with his black eyes and a few hairs on his head. He kissed her forehead, then the boy, and rose, feeling her hand clutch his still. Where are you going? Ayla asked, exhausted and in pain. I'll be right back, dear. Just got to tell the boys the good news is all. They ran down with me, and I'm sure Jurgensen wants to know what's happening. Jonas remembered that day clearly, how he had walked out of his house and given the news to those who waited outside. How they had clapped and laughed and raised him over their heads and congratulated him. It was the happiest day of his life, and now he stood in a solitary place on the worst day of his life, burying his beloved Ayla and knowing not how to handle it. That was basically chapter 1 of The Call of Jonas Creed. I know I'm not the best narrator in the world. I have no illusions. But that's why I'm the author, not a narrator. So, if you like it, please leave me some comments. Let me know, and maybe I'll do another chapter.